Hello everyone, thanks for joining me. My name is Graham Herbst with the Nebraska Forest Service. We're here today to talk about firewood and some important considerations to keep in mind as you harvest and store firewood for your property. First thing we'll do is quickly cover pruning and felling of trees. This is a topic that definitely deserves its own presentation and could be talked about in much greater detail, but there's just a couple key points to keep in mind if you're going to be harvesting firewood on your own property. With trees that are still in good shape, we want to take the branches off in a way that's going to maintain the tree's health and minimize exposure to decay on the rest of the tree. So we're going to do a three-cut method in which we start with an undercut, as you can see in the diagram on the top right, and then come through with a top cut that takes off the majority of the weight of the branch, followed by a third cut at the branch collar to clean up the stub. Now, we want to be sure that the branch bark ridge and the branch collar are not confused with each other, because cutting that branch all the way back to the branch bark ridge would definitely be cutting into wood from the stem or the trunk of the tree that can cause some decay issues down the road. And on the other side of things, with dropping the tree on the ground entirely, if we're not going to leave any portion of the tree up, we want to be sure that that's done with a proper hinge and back cut and in a safe manner. So definitely research those topics a little bit further if you're not familiar with them already. When harvesting firewood, whether we're cutting live branches off of our trees or felling entire trees and cutting them up on the ground, it's important that we're doing that work safely. So let's take a look at a diagram that shows a number of key pieces of equipment to do that work safely. Starting at the top, we have a hard hat and face shield, just designed to protect your head and your face from debris and falling branches as you're working. And we're also going to need some ear protection, usually in the form of some plugs or muffs that go inside or on top of your ears, just to protect from the high-pitched noise of the chainsaw itself. Then you're going to want to be sure that you have some leather gloves, of course, to protect your hands while you're dragging brush and operating the chainsaw, and some leg chaps that are designed with loosely packed Kevlar fiber inside that will bind up the chain of a saw if it were to come in contact with your leg before doing a severe amount of damage. And then, of course, a pair of sturdy work boots that will provide good ankle support and a steel toe to protect your toes from crushing. For acreage owners, another valuable resource for making decisions about your property is to contact your district forester. In Nebraska, we're divided into 6 different regions, and you can see contact information for each of those 6 district foresters for Nebraska. In your own state, you can contact your state forest service by phone or online and get information on how to contact them as well. These are individuals that are experienced in forest management and timber resources and can help you make good decisions about how and when to thin and manage your property. For harvesting your own firewood, if you're going to be doing a significant amount of it, there are a number of tools that are going to make your job a lot easier, and one of those is a quality chainsaw. Whatever brand you decide to go with, it's important that you consider some of the more rugged models that they offer. These chainsaws will serve you well and save you money in the long run over some cheaper versions. You can also see a log guide that's easily attached to most models of chainsaws and give you a consistent log length, which is important. Once we've used our chainsaw to cut up our firewood into logs of equal length, the rest of the tools that we have are going to be used to split that wood and move it to where we store it. You can see here a number of different alternatives for splitting wood with splitting mauls, wedges, and other devices, and then we're going to need a trusty wheelbarrow or cart to move that wood after we've had it split. Now that we've discussed how to harvest firewood in a safe and efficient way, let's talk a little bit about different types of firewood and their characteristics. The main difference you're going to have between different types of firewood are hardwood versus softwood, and this refers to the characteristics of the wood itself and the pore spaces inside the wood, which is going to play a big factor in how the wood burns. Hardwood is going to have a much more dense structure to the wood and burn longer and give you more energy efficient use of the weight that you purchase, while softwood trees are going to dry faster and maybe be less efficient but burn a little hotter. When selecting what type of firewood to buy, you're going to want to choose more carefully if you're purchasing firewood to heat your home exclusively, whereas if it's just something that you use to burn in the fireplace from time to time or in a fire pit, then you're not going to be quite as concerned with getting the most for your dollar when you don't use a lot of it. If you're heating your home exclusively with wood, it's important that you make good choices about what type of firewood you purchase. The one most important efficiency and safety factor with using your firewood is that it's well dried out or seasoned. And this is especially important if you're purchasing firewood, that way you're not paying for weight that you don't want in the wood anyway. And the best way that you can check for this is a term called checking, where you'll see a graying color on the cut surfaces as well as the cracking. When we discuss firewood safety, mostly what we're referring to is the possibility of chimney fires, which happens when the fire that we have in the vessel itself ignites creosote buildup in the flue above. Now, what contributes to creosote buildup is not only the type of wood that you burn, but much more so than we used to think, it has to do with how warm the entire flue is when we're burning the wood. When you're burning green wood, or wood that isn't dried out enough, or you're putting too much wood into the fire in the first place, then you have a fire that does a lot of smoldering and doesn't get nearly as hot. And the smoldering fumes from that fire have a lot more of what builds up as creosote inside the flue. So if we can burn smaller, hotter fires, then we keep the flue warm throughout and have less condensation build up higher up in the chimney. So you may be saying to yourself, okay, I burn dry wood and I keep the flame nice and hot, so I should be able to keep my flue looking just like it does on the left, right? Wrong. You're going to have some creosote buildup in your flue regardless of how good a practices you utilize. So you are definitely going to still need to have that flue checked. Usually once a year is a good amount of time to wait before you check again, and have that cleaned out when you have significant buildup, just to minimize the possibility of a chimney fire. And another factor that's going to play into all this is how much of your chimney extends up above the roof, because that's going to be obviously a much colder portion of the chimney and more likely to build up condensation, therefore more creosote. In order to store your firewood properly, there are a number of different options available to homeowners to do that in a way that will allow it to dry and cure properly and keep it out of the elements as best as possible. Now, racks on the left, as you see, have a tarp included with them, but if your wood is still green and drying out, you're going to want to limit how much you have that tarp on in order to allow the tree to breathe and give off that moisture as much as possible, but still probably throw that cover over it when it's raining to prevent any small amount of moisture being absorbed back into the wood that way. On the right, you can see a fancier version that will not only allow the air to circulate around the wood, but also still keep it out of the rain. You can see that both of these options keep the wood off the ground to obviously minimize rot and exposure to soil moisture. Finally, you may be asking yourself, well, how much wood do I need if I'm going to heat my house with wood exclusively? And that can be kind of hard to determine. There's a lot of factors, including the size of your house, the type of wood that you're burning, and what you can go by as a general rule is you're probably going to need somewhere between 5 and 7 cords of wood for a nice long winter to keep you toasty that whole time with no other supplemental heating. If you're just using it supplementally or recreationally, a cord to even a half a cord may do you for a season. And when we talk about a cord, what we mean is pieces of wood that are stacked 4 foot wide, 4 foot tall, and 8 feet deep. And depending on the variety of wood that you're looking at, that can be a weight of anywhere from 1 to 2.5 tons per cord. So you're definitely going to need to get a better feel for your wood consumption and maybe track that from one year to the next to give you a better forecast for what you're going to need to keep in the future. This concludes our discussion on firewood safety, harvesting, and storage. Any further questions can be directed to your local district forester or your state forest service. Thank you.